All right, kids, are you ready to hear a story? Yeah.
Welcome to Witch Toast and Other Tales. Alright, this story is called Bees. Once upon a time, there were these kids, and they were down in the Amazon. And from their hotel, they decided to go on a little adventure. So they rented a car and some dirt bikes, and they put the dirt bikes in the back of their car, and then they drove on a road. Paved road turned to gravel as they got closer to the forest. And then the gravel road turned into a dirt road. Dirt road, when it ended, turned into a dirt path. So they stopped their car, they got out, they got on their motorbikes, and they rode along the path. When the path got too tough for their motorbikes, they stopped and they walked. And they hiked, and they found a river. And they hiked up the river alongside it. It was tough going, but they kept going, and eventually they were rewarded. There's a big, beautiful, sparkling pool, and it had a waterfall going into it. They were so excited. They put their packs down, and they jumped in the water, and boy, was it nice. And it was nice and deep, too. Deep enough that they climbed up on top of that waterfall, and they jumped down. It was a good 50, 60 feet, but they mustered up the courage, and of course, once they did it once, they did it again and again and again. And they had so much fun, and they took a break, and they ate some food, had a little picnic, and they kept doing it. Best day ever. And then they decided, well, it's getting pretty late, they better head back, so they packed up their gear, and they started walking back along that trail. Well, they were a little ways back when one of them, Benny, was like, "Hey, do you guys smell that? Something smells delicious." The other ones were like, "We do kind of smell something. What do you think it is?" And he was like, "I don't know. Let's go find out." And so they turned off the trail, and they went off into the woods. And they walked a bit, and everyone else was kind of like, "All right, Benny, we haven't found this. Should we head back?" And he was like, "Wait a minute." And they crested a ridge, and the smell grew stronger than ever. And so they kept going, and Billy was a little ahead, and he stepped into a clearing, and he looked up, and his jaw dropped open. And they were like, "Billy, what is it? What is it?" And then they walked out into the clearing too, and they looked up, and their jaws dropped open as well. It was a huge tree right in front of them, with huge branches. But that isn't what made their jaws drop open. Nah. You see, hanging from one of those giant branches was a giant beehive. It must have been 25, 30 feet long and maybe 20 feet in diameter. They couldn't believe it. It was hanging there way up above them, and the hive was absolutely brimming with honey. They could see it kind of oozing out the sides. In fact, there was so much oozing out that at the bottom of the hive, there was a giant golden droplet of honey forming. And as they stood there staring up with their mouths open, it broke loose and it fell. "Get out of the way!" yelled Benny. And so they scattered, and the honey splashed down. Thwack! They turned back, and they were like, "Oh my gosh!" Benny was like, "It smells so good. We gotta get some." And he ran forward with his water bottle, and he dumped out the water. He scooped up a bunch of honey. And all the other kids, they ran up and they did the exact same thing. And they put the lids on, and their hands were all super sticky. But man, it smelled so good. And they each took a palmful, and they were licking it. It was so delicious. And that's when they heard the noise. Bzzz. They looked up, and guess what was crawling out of the beehive? That's right, bees, but not normal bees. This was a giant beehive. So crawling out of the giant beehive were giant bees. They were 3, 4, maybe even 5 feet long. And they had huge stingers on their butts. And the kids were like, "Uh-oh." And they were especially like, uh-oh, when the bees looked down at them and started doing this dance. They started shaking and shimmering, and they were like, uh-oh, this isn't good. And so they turned and were just about to run for the woods when a bee landed in front of them. And it was the strangest thing. The bee started shaking its butt and its legs and its antennae and hopping all around, doing some kind of weird jig or dance. And they were like, what's going on? And Benny was like, run for it! And they turned and they ran. They ran into the woods. And they heard bzzz, the buzzing behind them. They heard bzzz, the buzzing overhead. But they ran through the woods. They ran back to the trail. They ran down the trail. It's really too thick in the woods, and even on the trail for the bees to fly there. But they could hear the bees buzzing up above them, above the trees, behind them. And they ran down that trail just as fast as they could, and they reached their dirt bikes, and they hopped on them, and speeding along just as fast as they could. And those bees, they were still behind them, but there were fewer of them now. They went flying down. I mean, they were on dirt bikes, so they were moving darn fast. And then they reached where the car was, and they quickly drove up the ramps and put up the hitch and jumped inside the truck. And then they took off in the truck, flying down the road, and flying overhead were bees. But not that many this time. Now there are just 3 or 4. And the dirt road turned to gravel, and they could go a little faster. And now there are only 2 bees. And then there were no more bees, and they turned onto the paved road, and they sped all the way back to the city they were staying in. Well, not long after that, they flew home. They flew home with their water bottles full of honey. And a couple of them just kind of forgot about the honey. They put it in the back of their cupboard and just kind of forgot about it. But now Benny loved that honey so much. He developed a taste for it over the next week. By the time a month was out, he had eaten the whole water bottle's worth. And it was a big water bottle, too. And then something a little strange happened. See, he woke up one morning, and he went and looked in the mirror. He was like, something isn't right. What is it? What is it? He looked closer, couldn't quite figure it out. And then he looked down at his arm. Looked at his arm hair. It's like, that's weird. It's discolored. It's kind of whitish, almost in bands. And then he got a closer look, and he realized, wait a minute. That's not white. That's yellow. Yellow and black bands. And then he remembered back. He remembered back to that bee doing its jig, jumping and dancing in front of him. And he thought, wait a minute. Don't bees communicate by dancing? And then he wondered if those bees had always been bees. And he wondered what was going to happen to him. The moral of the story is don't eat things that come from weird creatures that got something that ain't quite right with them. You never know what's going on with those creatures. And that includes giant bees. The end.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe.